So why are we taking time to do this check? Because you've learned a lot about what works for you and what doesn't. We've learned what barriers commonly get in your way and what makes life easier for you. You've also probably experienced how life can feel like it derails you. And it honestly can make you feel discouraged. But I want to normalize something right here. Right now, lapses happen. No one sustains change without friction. But we want to work on stopping that from becoming a relapse where we go into old habits, the things that got us here in the first place. So relapse prevention research makes something very clear. A lapse becomes a relapse when it is interpreted as failure. So the problem is actually with our interpretation. The event itself is rarely the problem, and the meaning we attach to it is what is actually the problem. So if you overeat one evening, that's a lapse. If you tell yourself, I've blown it, and completely disengage for 2 weeks, that becomes the relapse. So this is why mindset matters so much. It's why we talk about it all the time here, because shame shuts down the behaviors we want, whereas planning helps sustain it. And research on coping planning shows that having a plan for obstacles significantly improves our long-term adherence. This is why we work on very specific implementation intentions, because these are the SMART goals that actually help us with very specific situations. So for you, I want you to think, instead of asking, why can't I stick with this? I want you to ask, is this truly a problem or a choice that I can fit in my week? What triggered that situation? What was happening earlier in the day? What can I do next time? What would I like to do next time? And this is why we build structure, but look at our long-term trends. When we look at averages over the week or month, it is easy to fit in your fun foods. This is why we take time and work on that 80-20 mindset so that you have time for real life. 80% supporting your goals, 20% where you actually engage with life. So if you feel like you've lapsed, it's just more data. More that you've learned about yourself and your life, more that you've learned about your common barriers, and really a chance to help you identify the true core habits that make a real difference for you. Now, I want you to consider those core habits. And here's another critical layer that we don't always talk about, our motivation quality. So we don't want to rely on motivation. It's kind of fickle. But there is work on self-determination theory that shows that autonomous motivation, so your internal why, predicts sustained change. So if your goal is rooted in that self-respect, that long-term health, that strength and capability, you are far more likely to sustain it than if it is driven by urgency or comparison or pressure. So in other words, I want you to think about this. Are you running away from something, or are you running towards something? So in momentum, we do not operate from panic. We operate from ownership. So when something goes off track, your reset looks a little bit more like a lapse, learn, and continue, rather than a lapse, shame, and quit. This is resilience. And this week, I want you practicing that strategic recommitment, not emotional reaction. And this program, remember, this is not about perfection, it is about preparation. So we're resetting with intention rather than guilt. So as you do your momentum check, I want you to ask a few key questions. What is working well that I want to protect? What feels harder than it should? And what are one or two habits, maybe core habits, that would make next week easier? Because that sustainable change comes from narrowing our focus, building momentum through those small wins. So choose a couple of core habits to maintain, maybe one habit that you actually want to focus on to improve.